attendees get on the call. Good morning from Israel. Actually, today I'm in Israel, and I am very excited to have here two great people from Chicago, which of course our guest, Dr. Stephen Nasatir, whom I'll talk about in a second after Mr. Elliot Robinson will introduce him to everybody. I will just tell, during this time that people get on the call, how it all started. So actually, Elliot was running a very, I think, third generation you are, Elliot, or second?
I am second generation of three.
Yeah, and Elliot has been running a very successful insurance business in Chicago for many years. And I believe we first met when Elliot came to one of our conferences in Israel and then later in Miami. And we spoke, and then I said at some point, listen, Elliot, you know the right people. You obviously have the right connections in Chicago. What if you were to do something in Chicago? Would you be interested in getting involved and helping us get to, the right families and the right partners and the right steering committee that we can build there? And Elliot was, of course, not of course, but luckily for me, said yes. And when we thought about names that we would have hoped to get to have involved in this, the name that I kept hearing, obviously from Elliot, and then later on, that we would be very fortunate to have is the great Dr. Stephen Nasatir and his amazing work being the longest running chairman, I think, of any Jewish federation in history. And I believe from what I read that raised over $8 billion in that time for different causes we'll be talking about. So Elliot is highly involved at our Chicago conference. It was supposed to happen right after the summer, and obviously we will postpone that maybe later this year, but probably early 2021. So Elliot, I'll let you, Stephen, Dr. Nasatir, for many years. I think, it would be great that you will introduce our guests today.
Thank you, Danny. Good morning to all, and for those of you who've just come on, my name is Elliot Robinson, and truly what an honor it is to introduce Dr. Stephen Nasatir, a man whose middle name should be Charity. He's revered by thousands, many of whom needed the chesed, the kindness, both financially and physically, that the Jewish United Fund of Chicago provided in the last 4 decades under Steve's leadership. As a board member of JUF for quite some time, I've had the opportunity of not only willingly donate money and time to this incredible organization, but I've been blessed to watch Steve lead. His commitments to charity, the Chicago White Sox in golf, are inspirational. So please sit back and enjoy the DC Finance debut of Dr. Stephen Nasatir.
Thank you. Thank you, Elliot. So you will be you'll stay on the call as an attendee, and feel free to ask questions. So thank you for that, Elliot, and I hope to see you, to meet you in person soon.
I hope so too.
Thank you. Stephen, thank you so much for being with us today. We've been working. We've been doing our conferences around the world, and federations and other Jewish associations were involved to some extent. And obviously, what you've been doing in the Jewish world, and I know you're very modest, because whenever we talk, you're saying, "Oh, it's a Chicago scene that's so nice and philanthropic." But I think anyone else I've spoken to just thinks, you're one of the most interesting persons in the Jewish world. If I will quote here, you're the longest serving CEO of any Jewish federation in history. Your organization, the Jewish United Fund, distributed, I believe, around $8 billion to charitable causes. since you took the job in 1979. Today, by the way, which is interesting, without any relation to you, really, your son is running the federation. We'll talk about that maybe later on. According to Bloomberg, it is the largest social service agency in Illinois. Dr. Nasatir is a Jewish leader of international renown and an executive of unparalleled achievement and tenure in the federation system. So, good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Danny, thank you. Thank you for the really very gracious comments. And to my friend Elliot, that was really a lovely introduction. And I've had the privilege of working with Elliot for many of those decades. And he is a leader of uncommon capacity and always there to do the right thing. So I was really very pleased, Danny, when you asked me to do this. I don't know what this is going to be exactly, but at a time where we're all kind of in our homes looking at screens, I hope that to have an opportunity to engage with the folks who are part of your group.
Of course, of course. So thank you. And we talked a little bit during one of our calls, and I wanted you, if you could share basically your life story, how you ended up doing what you do. You're a doctor as well. And here you are in the Jewish world. How did that happen?
Well, I wish I could tell you that I had an epiphany one day that said, go serve the Jewish people. That's not exactly how it happened. My quick bio, I grew up in Chicago. For those on this call who are familiar, North Side, Hollywood Park. We were members of Shara Tikva congregation, which was a very large conservative shul. And I went to Von Steuben High School. And during that period of time, again, day schools in America were just kind of opening up a little bit in Orthodox circles, but going to public school and going to cheder was the kind of way in which you, in addition to what you got at home, was the Jewish content. Played basketball at Von Steuben High School. I have 3 letters. Went to, at that time, the University of Illinois had a 2-year institution at Navy Pier, and then you would go down to Champaign to graduate. And I went to Navy Pier, and I played basketball there too, and then went down to Champaign to graduate. I remember really right after graduating, I had an undergraduate degree, and the 6-Day War took place. And for me, and I think for my generation of American Jews, I was at a point in time in my life where I could take in all the information and see what was going on. And I remember the concern in the couple of weeks leading up to the conflict and what would happen. By the way, I had never been to Israel. As a matter of fact, during that period of time, growing up in the 50s, early 60s, that wasn't something that lots and lots of American Jewish teenagers did. But we were a Zionist a family, and we certainly had a J&F box on our Shabbos table. And so I was concerned, and Nasser's saying they're going to drive him into the sea. And then, of course, the miracle of the 6 days. And like, again, so many in my generation, it was a jolt of great pride. I remember during that time making a $25 gift to the special emergency drive. $25 was not an insignificant amount for me. And I really do remember I did that because I just wanted to be part of something. I wanted somehow to be connected to this event that was taking place in Jewish life. And, you know, much later, that was something that I tried to encourage lots of people to do. But I did at that time. And to make a long story short, I did take a position at the university. When University of Illinois opened up in Chicago, I was offered a modest position as an instructor in the College of Education. And 4 years later, in 1971, I took a position at the Jewish Federation. And it was because I wanted to. And I wanted to do more in this area. And then, as you indicated, in '79, and I did go on, got a PhD, not an MD, a PhD from Northwestern, and I went on in '79 to become the executive, and the rest is where we are today.
Thank you. And so you've been working very hard for 4 decades without stopping for a second, raising a phenomenal amount of capital for Jewish causes that we'll talk about soon. How did you manage? And I know I read about similar communities in the size to Chicago, and I think they were around 20% or so, some of them. I don't remember if I looked at Washington and another one, I forgot. But like, it's really a huge achievement. How come? How did you manage to do that?
Well, first off, and again, and you know, and I have my own ego, and I feel very good about the successes that we've had. But it's not as if I was at an organization that didn't have its own history of success, you know, starting in 1900. And you know, I think there's a line, you know, we build on the shoulders of the people who come before us, and I think that's the Chicago Federation scene in terms of building on that. So yes, do things change over time? Of course they change, but some of the eternal values stay the same. And this idea of doing things together as a community, of keeping a community. In Chicago, we're about 300,000 Jews now, and that's large, but you do have a sense in Chicago that there is a Jewish community. It's not just a place where Jews happen to live. And I think that's always what's been special about Chicago. And Chicago also had strong connections to the birth and growth of Israel. And the generations that were in front of me really developed that platform, and we just took it to the logical next level in terms of taking care of our community here and being a part of the great miracle of building up the land and people in Israel, and being responsible to our brethren no matter where they live, including Soviet Union, Latin America, et cetera, et cetera. And so the messaging was good. And then, of course, also, I was very fortunate to have great professional staff, colleagues, and then the volunteer leadership, and just fabulous leadership. And, you know, the role of the executive is to bring those different assets, those human assets together, and together decide how we're going to do the next thing that we need to do. And, you know, I feel very good about the wonderful success that we've had.
And before we'll talk about some of the projects that you've been involved with, what have you learned in 4 decades of doing that? You know, I cannot think of anybody who knows better the challenges of raising capital, how you are to philanthropic causes, how to reach out, what you learned in 4 decades of doing that I think so many people would love to know.
I think, you know, and again, I think one, it's, you know, in real estate, they talk about location. Well, in community building, it's relationships. It's about engaging with people, and it's about listening. It's not always about, oh, I have this idea, let's do this. It's about listening. And I can tell you any number of times where I've had lunches or dinner with people where I have a particular idea of maybe the individual is interested in a particular thing that he or she might want to do. And I hold back before I do it and just listen. And by the time at the end of the conversation, the idea that I had is totally wrong for the person, because I listened and I understood better what their real interests were and what would resonate for them. So I think that's it. And I think it's about being engaging. It's about taking people from where they are. I think it's about projecting. It's about being credible. You know, people are not going to continue to participate in things that fail. But if the organization has a track record of success, then they're likely to continue to participate. And all those things together. And the main idea. And I know we're talking to a lot of folks with their own family offices and foundations and whatever. And there certainly is importance for individuals to do certain things on their own as they're motivated to do. Absolutely, that's great. But the really big things, I really do think the Jews have to do together. And we're a small people. And if everybody goes in their own direction and we can't do the big things collectively, then we're going to have some serious, we have challenges now, they're going to get more serious. So that concept of collective action, of listening to everybody, bringing in different views and trying to find that center where people could connect to what you're talking about, I think that's an important part of what I've learned.
And do you think your son deals with maybe tougher challenges than you when you started, in the sense that, you know, they say that the more generations, you know, out there, the less the connection is to Israel. That many people that would today take the helms are not feeling so connected to Israel anymore. Only their parents did. Do you see that?
I think that's a real, you know, on the whole, there's about 3 parts to your question, but on the whole, I'm optimistic about the next generation. I really am. That doesn't mean there aren't serious challenges, and I think the last couple of months in America has shown a lot of these challenges have surfaced in the larger society, and they will have impact in our Jewish community as well. But you know, if you read the history of the Jewish people, the generation that's running things always thinks that the generation behind them will never live up to the challenges and the responsibilities and all the rest. And somehow we seem to have been able to do that. So I'm optimistic, but I think we also have to use seichel, and we have to think about what are we doing with the next generation. And yes, there are, listen, this generation, the younger people, I was born in 45, so I don't remember 48. I don't remember, although I've read about the history. But my point is, you know, today's kids all have grown up with Israel being the Jewish state being here. It's always been part of their life, part of their reality. And I do think the most serious challenge that we may face in that is that sometimes people take Israel for granted. And I think that some of us that have have been around a little longer, I think one of our responsibilities is to say, don't take Israel for granted. You know, we went 2,000 years without a Jewish state. We have one now. It's precious, and we're privileged to live at a time of Jewish sovereignty. And so I think one of our responsibilities is to project that without bullying people into a position or without you know, forcing them and things. We need to give them experience. I mentioned that when I was growing up, kids didn't really go to Israel as teens or college students like today, thank God. I think that's a terrific opportunity, and to just continue to push that. We'll be beyond COVID someday, and we'll be back on airplanes someday. And I think opportunities, and to get our young people to Israel sooner rather than later. You know, what we do with college students is fabulous and terrific, but I really think we have to get them much earlier. And it's not just the family taking their children. And I have 5 sons, and yes, of course, I took them when they were young, but them going with their own age cohort. And I happen to think the 8th grade period of time, especially for public school Jewish Americans, is a great time to go to Israel and to experience Israel. And once you have that connection, and if they have the friends in Israel that they can connect to on the computer and on their phones, I think a lot of positive things come from that as well. So yes, it's a challenge. And with regard to my son, who's 50 years old, so he's not exactly the youngest man. He's got his own experiences. But having a first year that includes COVID-19 is a challenge all by itself in terms of the extraordinary new needs that are here. So he's working very hard. And I think back in time years ago where he would look to me and say, you know, Dad, you've worked so hard. maybe there's a more efficient way to do this. Maybe I don't have to put in that many hours. I haven't said to him, well, do you still think that maybe you really have to put in those kind of hours? And I know that he is, and I know he's doing a terrific job, and I'm proud of him, and I'm proud of the community. And I had nothing to do with him being chosen, that's for sure.
And I'm proud of you because we're more connected than you think, because I have 5 kids, and probably I have another 3 hours of session to do with you, asking you how you made it. And by the way, your next generation, so one obviously is taking your place in the Jewish world. The others went in different directions, or some are in the world of philanthropy somehow as well.
My other, I have one has a doctor's degree in education and actually works on programs for entrepreneurship in the inner city. So he's kind of an educator and a social action warrior, and I'm proud of him too. And then I have 2 that are in real estate, but they're both involved in our community. And then I have my 5th is still in college. So we'll watch and see where he is, and speaks perfect Hebrew, of which I am very, very jealous.
Wow.
His Ivrit is tov meod. So I'm very proud of him. He has spent a lot of time in Israel.
Very interesting. We have some questions here, but we'll address them soon from people. Before we'll go and dive into to some of your projects, I wanted to talk about COVID-19, but just before that, how did it happen that your son ended up being chosen? I mean, I know it's you had nothing to do with that. How did you see that? That doesn't happen a lot.
So my son was the Midwest director for the Anti-Defamation League, and he is an attorney by training. And I think he was there for 13 years. And prior to that, he did work for government, I guess involved in human service type activities. So he had lots of experience in this area, and Chicago, because it is a community, there is a real, the hiring of an executive. Again, in Chicago, we've only, believe it or not, Lonnie will be the 5th executive in 120 years. So we don't turn over all that often, which is I think a good thing. Certainly is a significant continuity when you have that. But my point is that to be an executive in a community, it really helps a lot if you're part of that community. It's not that we're selling widgets. And yes, it's possible for someone who's great in Los Angeles to do a great job in Chicago and vice versa. But when the individual is from Chicago, I think or whatever community that we're talking about, I think it's a tremendous leg up. I know it was for me being a Chicagoan. And I had 8 years in before I became the executive. So, there's a search committee. It was the first committee in 40 years that I had nothing to do with, and stood away because he did inform me that he was going to put his hat in the ring for this position. And there were other wonderful choices also that they could have made. So we had good choices. They made the choice that they made, and he's doing a terrific job.
Now, before we go to some of the interesting projects you've initiated, COVID-19. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about this horrible thing that changed our life. Can you share with us personally how it affects you in the Chicago scene? How is it going on in Chicago? What are you hearing from families you're speaking to?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Danny, as you and I were schmoozing before we came on, I think on a personal level, and then we can talk about community, institutional level, personal level, it's the lack of certainty about the future that I think is the most stressful. Okay, we worry about ourselves, we worry about our family, we worry about our associates. But if we knew for sure that, okay, if we behave this way for this long, then we can move back into a more normal set. Not knowing that, I think, is very, very stressful. And so I think we see the acting out of that stress in a variety of ways. And then, of course, the combination with the economy is, for people who were poor going into COVID-19, they're significantly worse than before. And we found ourselves in Chicago, back to, again, significant issues of food security and financial assistance, and doing the kinds of things that we don't spend as much time on usually. For a federation that's in its fundraising is directly connected to events, not only aren't you in your office, but you can't have any events. So to transition is not simple, and I think we've done a good job, and we're tracking well in terms of our last year's campaign. And then because of the COVID-19 and not wanting that to impact all the other things that we do, we did pull together a $26 million fund to be specific for that. That's off budget, and that's been very important. And I know a lot of other communities have done similar type of things.
And do you see any change in philanthropy giving during COVID-19? Are families giving even more, or on the contrary, they are busy with their troubles?
Well, again, I think at the top and obvious, we raised the $26 million from a small number of people because we didn't want to impact the regular campaign, and we were successful in doing that. So I do think that at the top, I think your largest donors, I think, continue to be very generous. We've always found it that way. When the recession came in 2008, we literally went to our largest donors and said, here's the situation, this is what we're dealing with. We really think it would be great if you could give twice as much, which is kind of what's the dick, I suppose. And they, a number of those people had previously agreed that was what was going to be, and that's how we kind of kept ourselves going in an important way during the recession. So again, it's doing it with others. It's listening to what they think, and then demonstrating success in what you do. But it's a tough one, and for the workforce, and when do you go back to work, and what are the concerns, and parents and their children and schools. I mean, everybody has the same thing, and it's not simple to navigate through this time. I think it's a time, by the way, especially for people with foundations and what have you. I think it's the time where you really think seriously of doing a lot more, because whatever the normal return, minimum return, 4, 5, 6%. No, this is the time to pick and choose areas where your additional dollars can do the most good. And our response to that has been like that. I think people with that capacity have identified the things that they think are the most important, and we've helped them in terms of doing this at that time.
Well, thank you. You've raised, I believe, $100 million for the Russian Jews project, helping those making Aliyah, I believe, to Israel at the time. Can you tell me how did that happen? Why Russia? Why then? How, the story behind it?
The Soviet Jewry, and I don't know the ages of the people that are on this thing, but for my generation, I'm 75. For my generation, the pride in Israel and the struggle for Soviet Jewry were the defining issues in terms of my identity and identity of a lot of people my age. And the Soviet Jewry, it wasn't something that, 1990 is here and the curtain is lifting and how do we help these people? It goes all the way back, really post 6-Day War. I remember Life magazine and the Leningrad 7, where they tried to steal a airplane to fly out and go to their ancestral home in Israel. And the opportunity during that period of time to visit with the refuseniks and the courage. And in later years, I became very friendly with Natan Sharansky, and, to be in Gulag for all those years, and the fight of his wife, and so many of these people, they were really inspirational. These were people who said no. They said no to the Soviet Union. I want to live my life as a Jew. You won't let me. I want to go to the Jewish nation and go to Israel. And if you think about history, in many ways, that was one of the first real clinks in the armor, I think, of the Soviet Empire in terms of people standing up. And by the way, and as you know, the refusnik, more or not, they were usually in the elite of Soviet society. They were the people with significant educations. They were people who said, forget about it. I want out. I want to go. So it was a long time, and and I remember the visiting, and we weren't heroes. We had U.S. passports, and yes, you can get hassled by the KBG a little here and a little there, but you were going to get back to America. These other people were just remarkable heroes. They were the vanguard of the movement. I remember '87 on the Mall when hundreds of thousands of Jews came together. Gorbachev was meeting with Reagan, and there were all kinds of issues. Should we, shouldn't we do this? We did, and it was extraordinary. And it comes back to that notion of collective. And I remember getting there in the mall and seeing the signs. I knew how many people we had brought from Chicago, but seeing Albuquerque and New York and San Francisco, that sense of collective support to let our people go was just huge. So in 1990, when the doors really did fly open, I think the issue wasn't just how much money we raised, but I've looked at these things. When we did our Operation Exodus, that's what it was called, and it was called Operation Exodus across the country. We had 65,000 individual gifts. And at that time, I don't think we were exactly 300,000, maybe we were 270,000. But if you think about that, 65,000 gifts, Jewish gifts, and you think about a multiple of what's in a family, pretty much just about everyone who could afford to do something did. And that was the extraordinary, unique issue of that. And not only did we raise that money, and not only did we participate in 1 million people going to Israel, which, as you know, transformed Israeli society. The impact on Israel today is in significant connection to the Jews that came from the Soviet Union, changed things around in many, many ways. And then, of course, we resettled, as did other communities, we resettled over 30,000 in Chicago. So not only did we raise the money, we then went to a bank and took out a loan for another $50,000 because we didn't want to hurt what we were already doing in the community. And we spent that $50,000 and paid ourselves back over time. And again, communities across the country did the same. So, my memories of that was, it was an extraordinary period of time. It did incredible things in terms of our own identity. 25 years later, we celebrated the march on Washington, and to see the children of those people who came, who are now lawyers and doctors, and the same in Israel, and members of Knesset, it was really kind of incredible. It's an incredible story, and again, just reaffirms that there are these great issues in Jewish life where we are so privileged to have an opportunity in our own little way to participate and make it good for the Jewish people. And certainly the struggle for Soviet Jewry was one of them.
How many came to Israel, made Aliyah?
Over 1 million.
Sorry?
In 1990, over 1 million. Over 1 million.
Amazing.
Over 1 million came and made Aliyah. And about over 300,000 came to the United States, and then a number of other countries as well. And I know we had in Chicago, we had over 30,000.
Now, another interesting project you've been supporting or very seriously and very, it's the second probably most known Aliyah in Israel, the Ethiopian Jews. So
Well,
I would love to hear the challenges that you had to deal with there. Completely different world, different culture, different challenges.
So again, I was so fortunate to have had these special opportunities. So in 1983, I get asked to be part of a 5-person delegation, the first official delegation to go to Ethiopia. Mengistu was the dictator president, and the invitation came from him. And why did he want, 5 representatives of the organized Jewish community to come to Ethiopia? We think, I don't know, because I never met Mengistu, but we think that he really believed that Jews ran the world. And he was having troubles in Ethiopia. He was having problems with Eritrea. He had some rebelliousness within the country. And he knew he had the Beta Yisrael in Ethiopia, and there was a connection to the Jewish people. And I think he saw them as a currency and as an opportunity to perhaps get more support from the United States, I think. In any case, we went in '83, which was extraordinary. I knew very little about what I was getting myself into. I did some quick reading. I do remember that Shabbos, I was called up. I got an aliyah before I left, and I don't know, 3 days later, I'm like in Gondor province of Ethiopia, and they were very proud. They had a Torah in this particular village, and they wanted us to see their Torah. And so we of course did. We didn't have a service, but so I go and I look at the Torah, and not surprising, it was exactly where we left off 3 days earlier. And that was my aha moment in terms of all of Israel is responsible for one another, and this connection to these dark-skinned people living in 16th, 17th century conditions, and yet there was this extraordinary connection, the Torah connection. So I became active. Within a year was the first significant movement of Ethiopian Jews. About 8,000 moved in a few days, and great footage, and of course it was difficult. And then they wanted to move a significant part of that community. And there came about the next 7 years, not a lot of movement. I'll share one quick one, and then I know that people might be other interested. I think you'll find this of interest. So at that time, the American Association for Ethiopian Jewry was also domiciled in Chicago, and they were very activist in their approach. Federation, we're activists too, but not as much as a grassroots organization might be. We have a lot of other things to think about. And I found myself kind of in the middle between the activism and the passion, and what I heard from American government officials, Israeli government officials, etc. Anyhow, so nothing was happening. Kissinger was coming to town to speak to us. He was now out of, it was Bush during the Bush 1 period of time. And so I asked for an opportunity to meet with him before he gave his speech. And I said, maybe you could use your contacts in the State Department. I told him the situation, what's happening, how do we move this? And he said that he would. A couple of weeks later, I get a phone call, and hello, Stephen. I can't imitate the accent exactly, but it was kind of a kick getting a call from Kissinger. And he said, tell your friends that a lot of people are working on it, that the president, this is Bush 1, is working on this. It's a big deal, and they just have to be patient. And of course, shortly thereafter, there was this incredible movement. They moved about 18,000 people in 23 hours, which was extraordinary. And Mengistu fled Ethiopia and went to Zimbabwe. And Bush worked out the amnesty for him in exile. And that was an important part of the connection. Anyhow, that happened. Wonderful thing. Fast forward again, President Bush is the speaker for JUF. So I asked through his people, can I get a couple of minutes with him before he makes his speech? They say, sure. So I go talk with President Bush. And some of you will remember, Bush had problems with the Jewish community. It was the AWACS were a difficult thing. I think he's polled in his second run 19%, which is really pretty low number. There was a third-party candidate as well. So there were a lot of issues there. In any case, I chatted with him, and I retold this story, and that how much on behalf of the Ethiopian Jews and the Jewish people, I just wanted to thank him for his special role in this. And he teared up. the President of the United States actually had tears in his eyes, and he said, I want you to know that I think that was one of the most important things I did as President of the United States. So, talk about kind of being in the right place at the right time and having an opportunity to get that. It's certainly nothing that I'll ever forget. And it kind of, again, talks about these different connections and people working together to make good things happen.
Amazing. And I guess it's so rewarding in that sense that, I mean, you've changed people's lives, and you've, probably had to deal with some tough challenges to get to where you want to get with making the Aliyah happen. And is there a moment in your career that you remember as the most exciting, that you were so fulfilled with an achievement, and that you can, I mean, you have plenty, but if you had to.
Well, I mean, there's a lot. I've just talked about two. I mean, to have, and again, it's my role, little piece, along with a lot of other people. But sometimes you never know where that little piece actually can be important. And again, those two, the movement to Soviet Jews was an extraordinary for me and for my community. And the Ethiopian Jews, also a sense. By the way, first time in world history that black-skinned people from Africa were moved to a Western society, not in change, but to become citizens. So at a time where people are pretty sensitive in terms of racial issues and where are the Jews, I think we have a lot to be proud about. So yeah, I mean, look, we talked about, the great things that you could do with money. Money is a way to do things. You talked about the big number. We had this idea, in addition to our regular campaigns and the special campaigns, again, like a lot of other communities, we had a centennial campaign in the year 2000, which was the 100-year anniversary, and it went on for a number of years. It was all the special projects that we wanted to do, and we raised over $1.2 billion. Well, I can tell you, I felt pretty good about that, because you know how the dollars can be used, and to, again, coming back to your earlier point, the next generation, and what do we have to do differently, and how can we use these assets in different kinds of ways for a different population of Jews. So you have these special moments, and but they're the moments that the whole community can share.
And then, I mean, I know you talked about it a little bit before, but if somebody's sitting here, thinking how you made this all happen, I think I read somewhere that you're meeting over 200 donors each year. If I'm taking out the month of the Jewish holidays, the Christian holidays, all of that, it probably means that at least every single day you've been meeting a major donor. So what would you have suggested to people that want to be as successful as you are in getting to the right families? You said to understand them, to understand their mindset, to
Yeah. I think that presidents of institutions, whether they're federations or universities or medical centers or smaller organizations, the days of the executive not being involved in the raising of the dollars, I think have been gone for a long time. And that's kind of how it once was. You have to be, because without the support, you can't meet the goals. And so I during the 8 years before I was executive, I was very much involved in campaign, and I brought that with me, and that sense of talking to people and listening to people. And it's not just about the quick, oh, let's talk, how much will you give? No, it's about knowing what schools their kids go to, and what else is going on in their life, and issues of business, and Elliot kibitzed about the White Sox and playing golf. All of that is part of being in relationship. And so I did. I would always penciled in just about every day an opportunity to have a breakfast or a lunch with a donor who, frankly, becomes your friend. Over a period of time, the relationships become pretty strong. And they know you're there for them, and they're there for you, and it all kind of comes together in a good way.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit. How do you see the Israel-American relationship throughout the years, 4 decades?
Yeah, I think, look, everyone is, COVID-19 takes a lot of energy and focus right now. I don't think there's a secret that the American Jewish community is not as unified around Israel as we were. Again, some of the people listening in may remember the UJA We Are One, which was very meaningful to me. I kind of believed it. I bought into it. I still think that's a goal. And Jews are a messianic people, so we're entitled to have goals that we try to bring people together. But to think that we are all one today is not true. We're not. And it's a challenge. It comes back to, people taking Israel for granted. I believe that as we deal with Israel, it's always seemed to me that when it comes to the issues of defense, security, the existential issues for Israel, that the democratic government of Israel's position, whether it may be different than mine or not, should be something that needs to be respected. And they have a democratic process. Their process is different than our process. That doesn't mean it's worse than our process or better than our process. And I think both processes in Israel and in America are under a certain amount of stress right now. But I believe it's not helpful to go talk to elected officials in the United States and say the government of Israel is wrong about this or that or the other thing on those security issues. That's how I feel. I think it's wrong. On other issues where we have a stake in what Israel does, religious pluralism, for example, I think religious pluralism is really important. I think that needs to be opened up, and I've made my feelings known to Israeli prime ministers on that subject. That's a little bit different. That's something that's about personal status, personal Jewish status. So I think people get a little bit out of their lanes and too much into the politics. In addition to which, governments of Israel, like governments of America, they come and they go. For American Jews, the people and the land, that's what we connect to. The government is the government, and whether you like that government or you don't like that government, but it's democratically elected, and they're the government. But I think our focus should always be the people in the land. And I think getting back to those kinds of basics and the connections, I think over the years, the opportunity we had with first Project Renewal, which was really Prime Minister Begin, who had that idea where we would twin with development towns, and the Partnership 2000 20 years ago, those concepts I think are terrific, because it wasn't just, American Jews coming in with money to help here. No. It was Israeli Jews and American Jews sitting together and discussing, how can we do this better? How can we make the problems into successes? And that peeling away and engaging. And then again, we live at a time where, I pick up my phone right now, I can call a friend. I'm talking to a friend in Israel right now, and we're seeing your face. So I think that, again, those opportunities for real engagement, and it works both ways. We host members of Knesset all many times in faith, and it's amazing sometimes how little they know about what living in a diaspora is about, and understand any kind of understanding. So I think it's a two-way street. And I think we have to work very, very hard at it. When I see Jews talk about, as one did recently, about a one-state solution, and then maybe there was the original sin is to be a Jewish state. It doesn't resonate very strongly with me. And I think it's kind of chutzpahdik for someone living in America to come up with those kinds of ideas. But it's a free country. People could say what they want. But we have troubles. We have problems. I think we have to figure out how to make that better. And again, maybe I'm Pollyannish, but I just think spending time makes a big difference. When our young people spend time in Israel, their connection to the people and the land become much more significant, and I think that'll carry them through their adult life. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to figure out how to maximize those opportunities.
Thank you. So a couple of questions from our audience here. So one is asking, does the United Jewish Fund work to help educate Americans and others around the world about the positive contributions of the Jewish people in, they're saying, the importance of freedom and the dangers of Marxism, communism, and fascism? Yeah. So
Yeah, sure, of course, but again, we also live in a hyper political environment right now. A federation that works with many thousands of people has to be nonpartisan. We may have our own political beliefs, but has to be nonpartisan. You're not going to find, at least this executive of a federation, signing on for different political causes. What I do is what I do personally, but not institutionally. And we have to, again, recognize that not everybody agrees with where we are coming from politically. But I think the one thing we haven't talked about, I think that one thing where it is incumbent us to do even better education job is the rise of anti-Semitism. And, I was talking about my generation. Well, I have to tell you, I listened to my parents talk about real anti-Semitism that they faced in America. And by and large, I didn't. By and large, I didn't. Yes, have there always been anti-Semites in America? Of course there are. Are there racists in America? Of course they are. Does that make America a racist country or an anti-Semitic country? No, it does not. So I think some of those things could be pursued individually. I don't think you could take to political attack as a fund that represents everybody. We did, by the way, take a position. It'd be interesting. So and some people would say that maybe we made a mistake, but on the Iranian deal under President Obama, we did go through a full month of review and did take a position that our elected officials should not vote for it. And we did that because we thought it jeopardized Israel. And we felt that that was a higher goal and that we should do that. And we did. We went through a full process. There were a number of people in the community that probably, not probably, did disagree. But we took that because we thought Jewish lives were at stake on that issue. But we don't go out of our way to find controversial political issues to get into. And again, on the anti-Semitism, there's no question in my mind where Marxism was used. I do think that there are some organizations out there that are anti-American and Marxist in nature, which are using different things to try to promulgate their own goals. But again, I think for a communal organization, nonpartisan is the best place to be.
Thank you. So a remark here from Nina. We are working on a project now for 5 years to develop One Humanity Institute, a solution-oriented response to never again just to Auschwitz. This is to focus on unity of all cultures and religions as needed so vitally now. Any suggestions for connecting, for relationships, for resources and partnerships, collective actions for the greater good? Jewish youth want to be part of a global family. So I'm not sure if this is a question for here and now, but that's one of the remarks here.
I would find it hard to not agree that, again, not in addition to our particularism as the Jewish community, I think if we are only for ourselves, then what are we? And I think that we do have a role, both institutionally and as individuals, to try to make a better world and bring people together. And everything that was said in that question, I certainly would endorse. And in addition, I don't think it's any secret. I think that the younger generation expects that of its Jewish leadership to, in fact, find ways to reach out. And and frankly, it's also in our best interests. The number of Hispanics in America from 2000 to 2020 has doubled. Okay, I'm not the first one to say this. As a result, the political influence of Hispanic people in terms of the future of America is very, very real. I don't think we've done as good a job as we probably should in terms of reaching out to that community, having them understand Israel better, having us understand the concerns that they have. How do we do things more in partnership? So it's the right thing to do, and it's also the smart thing to do. And I think we can make the same set of concerns in a variety of other ethnic communities as well. So I think we could do good, and at the same time of doing good, we could be doing good for our Jewish community as well.
Another question, how as Jews do we approach the issue of the cancel culture, of the boycotting and all of that, and extreme identity politics?
Yeah, I think this is, I think it's a minefield. I think that, again, I'm repeating myself a bit. I think that we have, I think the issue of racial justice, American Jews and racial justice. Again, I lived through the civil rights period of time. I don't know, maybe I lived a sheltered life, but I didn't know Jews who weren't in support of civil rights for African Americans. I just didn't know them. I think what we're having now is, I think it's, and especially as you're older people with our experiences, I admit it, some of it scares me a bit in terms of where are they going with some of this. So again, I think it comes back to listening. I think it's kind of threading the needle. It's understanding our role in helping people that need help. And certainly we're against racial discrimination. By the same token, I think my generation was taught that you should judge people not on the color of their skin. I think we listened to what Martin Luther King had to say, or on their gender. And I think it is different today to see that seems like almost everything is being seen through the prism of color or gender. So we're at a time of real change, and I think it's, you can get caught up in the cancel culture, So for example, we just had one. I mean, so when a NFL football player, says certain things about Hitler and quotes Farrakhan, etc., I don't think Jews have to just keep quiet because, we may offend somebody or we can get caught up in the I think there's ways of expressing our revulsion over that kind of ignorance, while at the same time showing our support for racial justice.
Now, a couple of other questions. Well, one is a remark here. Thank you. I think it is a very good idea to try to stay apolitical in some contexts. What an impressive set of actions you guys have carried out. And a couple of, I think, cute questions here. Spending more time at home and trying not to spend too much time watching Netflix. Any good, insightful books you can recommend?
I'm reading the new Scott. I don't know, this is especially insightful, but I'm actually friends with Scott Turow. We play golf together, and he has a new book out that I like everything that he reads. It's obviously fiction, and it's just kind of fun. I read the Dennis Ross Makovsky book that really focused on major decisions made by five prime ministers. I'm forgetting the title, but I thought it was interesting and important to read. So those are some of the things that I'm guilty, like everybody else, of watching a lot of Netflix, including Srugim, the knitted kippah. So I've been watching that too. I think it's very good. It really is. There's a lot of wonderful television coming from Israel.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe last question. This is something I didn't know about you. Apparently somebody else done a better job at reading. Thanks for making the time, Steve. I know you're a big baseball fan, and thank God not a Cubs fan. What's your outlook for the White Sox this year?
I think first of all, every baseball fan believes before the first game is played that the sky is the limit. If not, it would be hard to be a fan. I think the Sox are loaded. I'm sure this is not of interest to most of the people listening, but I do think they're loaded with a lot of young talent. Who knows what a 60-game schedule is going to look like. But I think the Sox are on the rise again. And, in Chicago, it's a little hard to be a White Sox fan because the majority are Cub fans. And not that I have anything bad to say about Cubs or the Cubs fans, but I enjoy being a White Sox fan. And so that's part of my counterculture thing. So I think they're going to be good this year.
So thank you. We have more questions I see from people, but we've been over an hour. Dr. Nasatir, anything else that maybe you'd like to tell our families that are watching here?
Danny, first off, I want to thank you for the invitation, and my friend Elliot for encouraging me to participate, and for the people who were nice enough to actually stay and to listen. But to those people, I do think, look, we are living through a difficult period of time, and philanthropy is important. And it doesn't, and again, I wear a particular hat and I wore it for a long time, but obviously it's not exclusive. Lots of good things that we can do in a variety of different ways. I do think this is a time for people of goodwill with capacity to really think long and hard about, how they can participate in ways that can make things better, because we need it. We need to get better. Let's hope a year from now we can all look back on this and feel that we're back to some kind of normalcy. So, and kol hakavod to all of you that are involved in the ways that you are. It's what makes America great and what makes the Jewish people great. So, toda rabah. Thank you.
Dr. Nasatir, thank you so much. We are looking forward to seeing you at our Chicago conference. That's how we got to know each other, and hopefully we'll have a great philanthropic panel when it happens, and it will happen because we never give up. So, we just adjust. So thank you so much. I will just say to everybody who's here that next week I will continue with philanthropy. I'll be speaking to Mr. Satish Kumar Modi, one of the most well-known families in India. There's actually a city on their name with 500,000 citizens. So he's from the UK, speaking at a UK conference. I would like to wish you all to stay safe. Dr. Nasatir, thank you so much for devoting the time and doing such important work. You should be very proud of yourself and your achievements. Thank you on behalf of everybody here in Israel. Thank you for all the great job you've done. Good luck for your son leading the efforts. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe. Thank you.